realise that some of the people who came into the shop were involved in terrorist support. That was when he had decided to act. He had found a police station and had told his story to a special branch officer. He was moved quickly through a well-tried route to MI5. Liz Carlyle had recruited him and had developed him as a long-term agent, persuading him to put off his university career for a year. In the months that followed, Marzipan, as he was known to MI5, had provided invaluable information about the comings and goings of people of interest. "It's very good to see you again, Sir Hale," said Liz. "Your message said you needed to see us urgently. Has something happened?" The young man said, "2 weeks ago, a man visited the bookshop. One of the boys in the shop told me he was an important imam visiting from Pakistan. I told this to Simon. He said that if the man came back to the shop, I should contact him immediately." Simon Willis was Dave Armstrong's working alias. Liz asked, "And you've seen this man again?" Sir Hale nodded. "This afternoon, he was upstairs with 3 other men. Young men, though one was older than the others. They were British Asians." "Are you sure?" "I'm certain. I heard them speak. I was sent upstairs to fix the video player." "What were they watching?" "A video the Imam had brought. There was a stack of them next to the VCR. When I connected the recorder, I turned on the machine to make sure it was working properly. That's when I saw part of the video they were watching. It was a video of the same man, the Imam. He was speaking in Urdu, saying that sometimes it was necessary to die for one's belief." "Did you see any more than that?" Sir Hale shook his head. "I didn't stay. I didn't want them to think I was paying much attention." "Why do you think they were watching it? I mean, if the Imam was there anyway." "It came to my mind that he had come here to tutor the men. I think he was preparing them for a mission, perhaps a suicide mission." "Why do you think that?" Sir Hale reached down and brought a small bag out of his knapsack. "I brought the video. The Imam left it behind. I went upstairs and watched it just before we closed." Liz quickly put the video into her bag, pleased that Sir Hale had brought it, but also appalled by the risk he was taking. "Won't they notice it's gone?" "There were many other videos upstairs, and I'm sure no one saw me go up there." "It'll have to go back quickly. These 3 men, how old were they?" "The young ones were about my age. The other one perhaps in his late 20s. "Would you recognise them again?" "I can't be sure. I didn't want to look at them too carefully, but they'll be back next week. Aswan, he works in the shop, asked if he should bring the machine down, but the owner said not to bother, as it would be needed again on Thursday. There is a series of videos for them to watch." "How do you know it'll be the same men?" "Because of the way he said it. Leave it, he said. They'll need it again next week. That is why I think they're in training." Liz thought for a moment, trying to decide what to do next. "Could you meet me again later this evening? I'd like to go and copy the video and also collect some photographs for you to look at. Can you do that?" Sir Hale nodded. She gave him an address in one of the anonymous streets north of Oxford Street. "We'll make sure you aren't followed. If we're not happy, someone will stop you on the street and ask you for the time. They'll ask you twice, and if that happens, don't go to the safe house. Walk straight on and go home." Liz looked at her watch. "It's now 7:30. I'll meet you there at 10. You're doing a brilliant job. Just go on being very careful, Sir Hale. If you ever feel you're in any danger, you must tell us at once. We don't expect you to put yourself in danger." She knew these were empty words. Of course he must be in jeopardy. In such operations, risk was inevitable. But Sir Hale said simply, resolutely, "I will do everything I can." Liz hailed a taxi and directed the driver to the Atrium restaurant on Millbank. From there it was a short walk to Thames House, the massive building on the north bank of the Thames, which was the headquarters of MI5. Within 20 minutes of leaving Marzipan, she was back at her desk. There was much to do. The video had to be copied, the arrangements for the safe house confirmed, a fresh A4 team conjured up to replace Wally Woods, now going off duty. Then she reached the telephone and dialed counter-terrorist operations. Judith Spratt answered. Judith was an old friend. The two had joined the service on the same day over a decade before, and both had worked in the counter-terrorism branch now for 6 years. But while Liz's talents had taken her in the direction of agent running, Judith's sharp analytical skills had turned her into an expert investigator. She and her team of colleagues followed up all the pieces of information that came into the counter-terrorism branch. So it was to Judith now that Liz went for the portfolio of British Asians suspected of involvement in terrorism. Clutching the large leather portfolio Judith gave her, she took the lift down to the basement garage and collected one of the anonymous fleet vehicles. She drove up Regent Street, through Oxford Circus, eventually turning under an arch into a mews of small houses. A garage door swung up when she pressed the bleeper in the car, and she drove in. Above the garage was a warm, cheerful sitting room, furnished with a couple of well-used sofas, a dining table with several chairs, and a battered coffee table. A quarter of an hour later, as Liz was still unpacking the photographs, the phone rang. 90 seconds, said a voice. All clear. She opened the door, immediately the bell rang, and led Marzipan up the stairs. Would you like something to drink? Tea, perhaps, or coffee? Sir Hale shook his head. I don't need anything. All right, then let's get started. Sir Hale took his time, examining each photograph carefully before regretfully shaking his head. By 10:30, when they were only halfway through, it occurred to Liz that Sir Hale's parents would start to worry if he were unusually late. I think we should call it a day, she announced. Could you look at the rest tomorrow evening? He nodded. Then let's meet up here again, shall we say 7:30? Take a cab home, I'll call one. She went and made the call. When she returned, she said, Leave here in 10 minutes. Walk out of the mews, turn left, and a taxi will come along the street. As it approaches, it will put on its light. The driver will drop you off a few streets from home. She looked at the young man, and suddenly felt a tenderness towards him that was almost maternal. Maddie came back to Belfast when her mother Molly telephoned to tell her the doctor's news. There was nothing to be done except manage the pain. Sean Keeney would die at home. So she returned to the small brick house just off the Falls Road in Belfast, a house as drab as any of its neighbours. Only the most careful observer would notice the extraordinary thickness of the front door, or how the painted shutters were steel reinforced. Maddie had come only because her mother had asked her to. As a little girl, her dislike for her father had been matched by the intensity of love she'd felt for her mother. Maddie simply couldn't fathom her mother's willingness to subordinate her own qualities to the demand of her husband that the struggle should always come first. Maddie was never sure which she felt more contemptible, the man or the movement. She had got away from both as soon as she could, leaving at 18 to study law at University College Dublin, then staying on to work there. Now she sat with her mother and sister Kate in the small sitting room downstairs, while in his bed on the floor above them her father lay, heavily sedated. Word went out that Sean Keeney would be glad to have final visits from those who had served with him since the Troubles flared in the late 1960s. The visitors were all known to the family. Many had served prison terms for their parts in assassinations or bombings, and were free now only because of the amnesty provisions of the Good Friday Agreement. Keeney had managed to avoid any criminal conviction, but he had been interned in the 1970s for over a year in the Maze prison. The men were shown upstairs. Maddie could see that Keeney's condition shocked them. Once a barrel of a man, he had been reduced in his terminal illness to a small, shrunken figure. Sensing his fatigue, most of his old associates kept their visits short. Maddie could see how much even these brief visits drained her father's dwindling energy. and she was relieved when there was no one left on the visit.